Hi, I'm Tara Bradley with the Growth State, and I'm so excited to have Jason Kraus with us today. Jason has got a lot of experience under his belt. He's been known as a serial entrepreneur by his friends and family. He started his first startup in college and has done many things since then, including his consulting firm, which is Prepare for VC. He's also actively involved in the investment group Equity Venture Partners, and later joined as a partner in the micro VC EQX fund. He's a sought out speaker. He's an authority on the subject, and we're super excited to have him. One of Jason's latest ventures is actually a book called Venture Forward. And I'm super excited to have him with us today to tell us a little bit about his journey and what we can learn in the venture process. So, Jason, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, really excited to be here. Thanks for inviting me on.
Awesome. Well, I love to start with a pain point question, and my first question to you is, you have a long list of accolades behind your name already, and then you decided to write a book. And usually,
Yeah.
I find that people that are really successful in other areas, they're not writing a book to get rich. They're writing a book because they've had some pain point or they've had some experience that they feel like someone can really benefit from that experience. And I'd love to know, what was that pain point for you that you said, hey, I really feel like I've got to write a book to help these people out?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and part of the reasoning was the experiences I've had in my own ventures. Part was just the philosophy and like my belief that all startup founders out there, or basically what we've seen is serial entrepreneurs, like people that have sort of gone through the process before, have had more success, whether or not they've been successful or failed on a previous venture. And it was that experience of just going through and learning from what you've done in the past to apply it to your next business. So the philosophy is like, and what I wanted to capture in the book is if everyone can learn from other entrepreneurs, whether it was the stories I was sharing of other founders or stories of what I've done myself, it can help them sort of get past the failure moments in their own business and focus on what they can do successfully. So I mean, part of it, been involved in both sides, or I guess, successful ventures and like failures. Started out a mobile app in college that ended up having, it was called Night Owl. There was a bunch of apps called Night Owl, and didn't do enough due diligence there. And it was a good learning point that sort of led me into learning more about entrepreneurship and going down this venture and consulting pathway.
That's great. Well, I love that was your motivation. I think as founders and CEOs, or even leading scaling companies, when we make a mistake or we do something like that, you feel very alone. But then when you start to share those pain points, you're like, wow, I'm not alone. I'm not the only person that's made that mistake, and maybe someone can learn from it. So I definitely appreciate that. What do you think is the biggest factor for founders when they're coming to the VC, they got the meeting, they've got enough to get some interest, but then they're just not ready. Something takes them by surprise. Do you find that there's a commonality in that you get in front of somebody and you're like, they weren't prepared for what you kind of feel like is a softball question, but it clearly took them by surprise?
Yeah. I mean, some of it is, some of it's confidence in your own business, like, and not just being, overconfident, but actually presenting something you really believe to be a huge successful business. So, if you don't believe it yourself as the founder, it's really hard to get other people on board and invested in your company. I'd say the other side is sort of doing your research and homework on both. A lot of times investors will want to know like about the competition, and sometimes founders will say there's no competition, or really don't understand basically what whether it's even like competing against phone calls and text messages or competing against other ways of doing business, sort of understanding what characteristics and traits they have to replace to be successful in their business. So yeah, homework on the market and competition, as well as homework on the investors, and portfolios are pretty easy to look up, like what the investors have gone into, what excites them on their ventures, like what are they posting on their blog or LinkedIn posts, and getting to know them as well before you take a meeting.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I've been through a few different transactions, and I think it's a really great point. People don't often take the time to really know their space in a way that an investor wants to know it, right? They want to know what's the market. They want to know how much share it is, and are there adjacencies that they can go into. So I think that's a really solid point. And it's one of the things that I think you hit on that I think a lot of people miss is go out there and find out about the partner that you really want. It's kind of like saying, hey, I want to go to this college, but I don't know why. Do your research and say, is this somebody I want to be, hooked up to for the next 3 to 5 years, and in really tight partnership with. So I definitely appreciate that. I think our philosophies are really similar in that, you've got to know your business, you've got to solve a problem. You definitely have got to have something that's going to sell in a way to fill that pipe so that you can access that market. What about the team? What are you looking for from a founder CEO's team when you invest in that? Is that a big deal to you, or do you like to help them build their team so they can grow through that? What's your take on that?
Yeah, so our take is that it's actually like the most important part, especially at an early stage. So yeah, for our fund, EQX fund, the EQ stands for emotional quotient, and like the leadership skills that they're bringing into the business. So a lot of funds say that team is most important, but that's actually like we consider our sort of portfolio of founders that we've invested in compared to the portfolio of startups. So what we're looking for is basically, have they had experience managing teams, whether it's in a startup environment or in a corporate environment. Are they actively looking for feedback and advice on their business? Like, how do they interact with us as investors? And does their do they have the ability to execute on sort of everything, basically everything they're pitching, like from the day-to-day management of the business, the fundraising. There's a lot of hats you have to run it. Whereas a CEO, and if they don't have expertise in one area, like, have they found other people they can turn to for advice, whether it's team members or board members. A lot of times, even just like the people that they brought onto a board of advisors or directors excites us about their ability to seek out advice and find great people to bring in.
Sure. I think it's interesting that the team is an aspect, because it's also a challenge, right? They're a startup. They are strapped for cash. Sometimes they're not making a profit. They're still trying to get to profitability, and in the case of a lot of this audience, they're really focused on revenue growth and not so much on cash flow break even just yet. How do they evaluate and figure out what they can afford from a leadership team if they have a really broad need for a couple of kind of high level leaders?
Yeah, so I think at an early or part of it's the CEO's background. Are they an expert in the field that that they're building a product in, or do they, what's their reason for going into this venture versus going down? I mean, a lot of entrepreneurs have a bunch of exciting ideas they come up with. So, like, why are they the best fit for this startup idea versus another? So yeah, part of it's, the founders and co-founders. Part of it is you can bring, a lot of experts that are open to even smaller, like more advisory positions within companies if they can dedicate, a few hours a month or like more time, a little bit of time every week versus somebody that's involved day to day in the business. So they can find great people to get excited about it before they really have the cash flow that can hire more people full time and still get some of that expertise to move the business along. That's an exciting component for us. And yeah, sometimes it's even like having the people lined up that are ready to come into the business when you get investment, knowing sort of if you had funding in today, like who would your first hire be? How would you keep this moving in the right direction versus, having an investment coming in now and then trying to find the right people for the next 6 months from here, like knowing there's a clear direction and pathway to move everything forward and have the right people involved in the venture.
Yeah, I love that. And so, what I hear you saying is there really, you don't have to have it all figured out, but be looking for advisors and kind of some alternatives to help you through that. Which I think is a great segue into the next question is what's the best way to leverage your venture partnership and really learn from it? I think so many people are, they start it and they're the founder CEO and they think they have it all figured out and they just want the cash, right? They're like,
Right.
just keep me afloat so I can keep going. But they're a lot of times missing out on this gold mine of experience and expertise. What's the very best way to leverage that partnership so that you can take advantage of that?
Yeah. So I think, yeah, some of it are basically being clear and open about, um, not just highlighting what's going well and what's exciting about your company, but keeping investors updated on other areas they can help or challenges you're facing as well. So, if you're looking or could be looking for hires or looking, to connect with, there could be um, partners, customers, like strategic investors that you've been trying to connect with that you haven't been able to, and letting investors know that and seeing if their network can help out. Even just there might be, a business model you've been working through that there's a couple different options you're trying to figure out which makes the most sense, and getting expertise from your investors on that. A lot of or most investors have seen, uh, been involved in and seen, dozens of startup business models that they can say like, all right, this has been successful for some of the companies we've worked with, or this is, an area you might struggle with at the beginning. So sort of leveraging that expertise and, yeah, so applying it to your business.
Sure.
And yeah, I think, sometimes that means, more direct, like one-on-one communication on an ongoing basis. Sometimes that means like doing a monthly or quarterly call to really dive in deep and go through it with all your investors. But yeah, just I'd say for the most part, it's whatever really keeps everything on track and benefits the company the most.
Great. So what I think I hear you saying is it's transparency is really key and building those relationships. I think I found that as well. It's like, if something's going bad, they're going to find out eventually anyway. So you may as well just throw it out there and say, help me. I've got this problem.
Right.
Help me. Yeah, for sure. Um, I also think it's a huge education, right? Like if I think back to my very first interaction with my first VC group, and we would have our own kind of internal board meetings with our angels, and they were very, hey, here's what sales did, and yeah, we grew revenue, and then I remember my first venture capital meeting, and he said, well, what's your CAC score? And I'm like, I don't even know what that is. And then our board
Yeah.
decks, we were 70 pages long, but they weren't really saying anything. And so we learned through that process. And then we graduated to private equity, it was a different experience. And with every partner we had a different experience. So I love the idea that you shared of being transparent, because the more transparent you are with them, what I have found is they can always give you an education that you're going to be able to take on to the next venture and the next venture and the next venture.
Right. Yeah, and I think, the mindset too is we've already we've already invested in your company. We're rooting for the success of the business. At this point, it's basically how can our success is lined up with the entrepreneur's success. So anything they can share with us that we can add value back to the company, makes sense to keep it transparent and see how we can best leverage the relationship.
Yeah. One of the things that I think is always interesting in a founder CEO group and a tight leadership team, particularly if they're getting, Series A funding, is they probably have some people on their team, even in the leadership team. The team that got you here is not going to get you there, right? For the most part. And so, how can the VC help them evaluate the team that they have and decide when they need to do a swap out or an upgrade of talent?
Yeah, I know. That's an interesting question. Like, I think compared to compared to the other VCs, like we look more for founder-led company. Sometimes it makes sense to bring somebody in. If I guess, yeah, I mean, if there's certain scenarios where like there's a great or some of there could be a great founder that's good at running a 10-person team, but not 50 to 100-person
Right.
team. Or there's a great scientific founder that once they go through, more of trials and approvals, they need more of a business CEO to come in. But for the most part, we're focused more on like how can the founder become the leader and CEO of the business and take the company forward. Sometimes it is, there's a group that founded it, has a CEO they brought into the company. But I mean, we've even looked at like there's a couple, publicly traded like stock market ETFs that the founder that are focused on founder-led public companies, and they, on average, they tend to do a lot better than the overall stock market. So if you can find and keep that great leadership early on, and then just expand it with other people you bring into the company, I think that can keep the company on the right track and moving forward.
I think that's great. And so what I think I hear you saying is you're an advocate of saying, hey, let's take the leadership team we have and let's see what we can do to invest in them so that we can keep that same team getting us kind of to the next step. And then if we have to pivot, we at least feel like we invested in the right spot and gave them the opportunity. And then, it's kind of as a last resort that we say, hey, we've got to make a team change here.
Right. Yeah. Cause I mean, again, our model is we're investing in the people. So we already think of them as the leaders of their company. Sometimes there's, additional product lines they come up with that they need, a director of that or additional, or they do go in a different direction and need somebody to come in and have more expertise in that space. But we want to help the team grow as much as the startup grows.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point, where they could have a different product line or go a different direction. We're in the land of the pivot right now, right? With the pandemic and everything else. How do you balance that? You've got your core, you've got your meat and potatoes. It's gonna, what you bought them for, but then you see a need to pivot. Like and sometimes that can be hard for a founder CEO, right? Like sometimes it's like your baby's ugly. We got to go a different direction with this. How do you help them get through that and really evaluate it in a very non-emotional way?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a big topic right now. So there's in our view is like these are still startups we're investing in for not just this year, it's for the next 3, 5, 7 years, however long it takes until an exit. So there could be opportunities that I guess don't necessarily, or there could be opportunities that make sense for a full pivot, but there could also be areas they can capture right now while they still focus on their long-term business and not necessarily pivot away from it, just add in some like cash flow and opportunities that they might not have had otherwise. So I guess I'd say it's most important to focus on like where you still want the company to be going, down the road from here. But if there's other ways that fit into that vision and you can either add on or adjust and pivot to in the meantime, then it makes sense to do that. As far as like full pivots into a new product, it's really about, I'd say it's really about listening to the customers and what they're looking for, what they're willing to pay for, and what makes people sign up and actually use what you're building out versus just building features and seeing if people will end up using it.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. We've got so many founder CEOs, they try to bootstrap, they get a few angel investors. They start their company for a variety of reasons, right? They are so deep in the niche that they just feel the pain and they know they can fix it with a cool product, or they're tired of the 9 to 5 and like, I can go run my own company. How do they know when they're ready for a VC partner? And how do they know VC is the right option for them?
Yeah, so I mean, it's not, and it's not always the right option. So it has to sort of be in line with the goals of their company. Sometimes you want to build this as a business that can just be bootstrapped, can provide, can make enough money to provide salaries for the team, can still have that growth and the ownership in the business that, the founders will own 100% of. And that's the path that you want to go forward on. Other times there's a scale factor and opportunity of bringing in equity investors where if you can get cash early on into the business, then you can see like a multiple of growth that can lead towards, or most of the, if you're bringing in equity investors, you're typically going to be looking for an exit pathway, which is either an acquisition, an IPO, or a private equity buyout. And you have to keep that, or sort of keep your goals for the business in line with what investors are looking for. And as far as timing, I'd say for the most part, there's always a value that if investors are looking to fund you at a certain valuation, you would take capital, but it's sort of building up enough traction to the more traction you get, the more the pool of investors opens up, and the more you can sort of get what you're looking for in terms of valuation or interest from investors.
Sure. Investors always want something different, right? And that can play a big factor in where you're at and what you're looking for. What's your view on profitability? Do they need to be profitable? Do they need to have a path to profitability? Do they need to get there within the first 12 months? Do you kind of have a formula that you like to use when you're coaching people?
Yeah, so there's what's called the rule of 40, which is basically there's a balance between your profit margin and your growth rate. So the more you put into growth, you can have, or the more you put into growth, the less cash flow there is for profit. But you can also balance that with having more profit. And having less growth. And overall, you want to see the number or sort of the percentage of growth rate plus the profit margin being over 40%, and that ends up having the highest multiples. In terms of where to balance, like I think the biggest thing for our philosophy versus much larger VCs is we do like profitable companies in terms of I guess it also decreases the amount of the fundraising risk in the future if we know, they're able to produce. If it takes them 3 or 6 months longer to raise their next round, they have cash flow coming in that can keep the business going and keep moving while they seek out the next round of investors.
Perfect. I love that you brought up the rule of 40 for those of you watching. If you're not familiar with the rule of 40 and you're looking to get either a VC or PE partner, you have to learn about it. It's a formula that you're going to want to know. There's a ton of science and statistics behind the fact that the longer you can stay in that rule of 40, the more likely that you're going to be successful long term. And if you're going at 50% year over year, you got a whole bunch of people who will sign up if you're not profitable. But if you're profitable and you're still growing at 20% per year, you can still get some decent interest too. So definitely get yourself familiar with that. So Jason, we're just about out of time, and I've loved talking to you. If somebody is interested in, obviously, if they want to know more and just get prepared for what the venture process is like, get your book, Venture Forward, which has got a ton of cool stories, not just how to get prepared, but experiences of other people who've been through it, which I think is always fun to hear. It's one of my favorite things when I meet new VCs or bankers or PE guys. Like, tell me about your crazy deals that you've done, or all of the stories that you have. But you also have, prep for VC, and you've got some funds. How do people get a hold of you, or if they're interested in working with you or getting your expertise? What's the best way to do that?
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to connect with anyone that's watching and listening to this, either on LinkedIn or through my personal site at just jasonkraus.me. And so I have information on all of on the book, on all the companies I'm involved in, and a calendar link to schedule a call from there as well. So yeah, I would definitely be happy to speak with anybody that took the time to listen to this.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Jason, and I appreciate your time, and you have a great rest of the day.
Thanks. You too.
Thank you.